Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Listeners, this one is really something else.
It really is. This book that surfaced online,
Oh, yeah.
supposedly a memoir from Kim Porter,
Yeah.
it's got the internet buzzing.
Yeah, and for good reason, right? We are talking about a tell-all memoir that's allegedly written by Kim Porter, Diddy's former partner,
Right.
before her passing. And it's painting a very, very different picture of the hip-hop mogul.
Totally. And, we've got to be careful, right? We have to approach this with some caution because we're dealing with a posthumously published work here.
Of course, yeah.
It's not to say that the claims aren't valid or anything like that, but we have to, approach it with a grain of salt and be really careful about distinguishing between allegations and cold hard facts, right?
Absolutely. And that's why we're here, right? We're going to dig into this book and really unpack all of the shocking details that are in here.
Please.
So the book dives deep into Kim Porter's relationship with Diddy, and to put it lightly, it gets pretty intense pretty quickly.
Yeah.
One of the biggest bombshells that's dropped in here is this claim that Diddy is gay
Yeah.
and that he was using Porter as a beard.
Right.
And she even goes on to detail alleged encounters with other celebrities.
Yeah. And this is explosive stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about someone like Diddy who has cultivated this very specific public persona over the decades.
Yeah.
This kind of claim, if true, has the power to really kind of shake the foundations of hip hop history. And it makes you wonder, what could have been going on behind the scenes? What kind of pressure was he facing to maybe conceal a part of himself like that?
And that's such a great point because the book goes on to detail allegations of abuse by Diddy, physical and emotional abuse, painting this really, really dark picture of their relationship.
Yeah, and this is incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
Right? This is serious stuff.
Yeah.
And as someone who has, studied the impact of these kinds of toxic relationships, especially when you factor in the power dynamics at play here.
Oh, totally.
Diddy as this, music mogul,
Right.
and then Kim Porter as, his partner.
Yeah.
It adds a whole other layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Absolutely. And it gets even more complicated because this book doesn't shy away from suggesting that Diddy might have even been involved in some of the biggest tragedies in hip-hop history.
Oh.
We're talking about Biggie. We're talking about Tupac.
This is where it really goes from, celebrity tell-all to something far more serious. And, the book claims that Diddy was aware of a plan to kill Biggie,
Wow.
but that he didn't try to protect him.
And so for our listeners out there, I want to know what you guys think about this, because on the one hand, you have this posthumously published memoir,
Right.
and on the other hand, you have these incredibly serious accusations. What does that do with you guys when you hear that?
It's tough because, you want to take these claims seriously,
Yeah.
but you also have to weigh the context, right? We have to remember, this is the height of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry.
Oh.
Tensions were high.
Oh, yeah.
Things were volatile. There was real violence.
It was powder keg.
It was a powder keg, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to think about these accusations within that framework.
Totally. And what makes it even more disturbing is this suggestion in the book that Diddy might have actually profited from Biggie's death, that the album sales after his passing far exceeded anything he would have seen while he was alive.
Right. And that raises some very unsettling questions about the music industry itself.
Oh, yeah.
Were they doing enough to protect their artists? Or were they more concerned with, the bottom line?
It's a question that still haunts the industry to this day, right?
Absolutely.
And this book just shines such a huge spotlight on just how dangerous things had gotten back then. It makes you wonder what else was going on that we didn't hear about.
Right? Like what was really happening behind closed doors. And, it gets even wilder.
Oh, yeah.
Because the book actually recounts this alleged meeting between Porter and Biggie's mom, Philetta Wallace.
Oh, wow.
Where she straight up confronts Diddy about his role in her son's death.
Oh, my God.
Can you imagine being a fly on the wall for that conversation?
I can't even fathom that level of grief and anger and just all the emotions that must have been in that room.
Absolutely. And, to think that this is just one piece of this huge puzzle that Porter's trying to put together in this book.
Right.
It goes even further than that. We haven't even gotten into the allegations that Diddy was involved in other deaths.
Yeah, like orchestrated hits and stuff.
Exactly. Orchestrating hits on people who he saw as threats to his empire.
That is crazy.
And that's where, we have to take a step back and remember that we're dealing with allegations here.
Of course, yeah.
These are serious accusations, but they are just accusations at this point.
Right.
We have to be really careful about not jumping to conclusions until, all the facts are out there.
Right, but even as allegations, I mean, the picture that this book is painting is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it's a chilling portrait of a man who seems to be drunk on power,
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is something that we see time and time again, right? It's not just the music industry. It's like across the board.
Absolutely.
When people amass a certain level of wealth and influence, it's like they start to believe that they're invincible.
Untouchable.
Untouchable, exactly. Like the rules don't apply to them.
And what's really disturbing is how this alleged need for control manifested in Diddy's personal life, too.
Right.
Like, the book talks about how he allegedly used sex as a way to manipulate people, creating these situations where consent was questionable at best.
Yeah, and this is where things go from, salacious gossip to something much darker.
For sure.
We're talking about potential criminal behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of abuse of power, it's sadly not uncommon in these spaces where you have these huge power imbalances.
And it makes you realize that behind all the glitz and glamour, there are real people whose lives are being deeply affected.
Absolutely. Like, these aren't just stories.
Yeah.
These are people's lives.
Right.
And the consequences of these actions, they have a ripple effect.
Totally. And we can't forget, how much courage it probably took for Porter to even write these things down.
Oh, absolutely.
To speak out against someone as powerful as Diddy, I mean, that's huge.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder how many other stories are out there,
Oh, I'm sure.
Stories just like the stories of abuse and manipulation.
Yeah.
But they're too afraid to come forward.
Because they're silenced?
Exactly. They're afraid of the repercussions.
It's so important to talk about this stuff, though.
It is. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. We have to shine a light on these dark corners.
And what really got me was this part in the book where Porter talks about confronting Diddy with evidence of his alleged wrongdoings.
Oh, wow.
She had made copies of tapes from his private collection.
She was like playing 4D chess or something.
I know, right? It's like something out of a movie.
It's intense.
It is. And it really shows how far she was willing to go to expose the truth.
Right. And it also shows how far people in power will go to protect themselves, trying to silence her, trying to bury the truth. It's a tale as old as time.
And it makes you realize that we as consumers of this stuff, the music, the celebrity culture.
We have a responsibility.
We have a responsibility to be critical thinkers.
Absolutely.
To not just accept everything we see and hear.
To question the narrative.
Exactly. Because there's always more to the story, right?
Always.
And it's not just about protecting himself while he was alive either. This book suggests that Diddy's attempts to silence Porter may have even extended beyond the grave.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most shocking parts of this book is how Porter believed that Diddy was responsible for her death.
It's crazy.
She claims that when she fell ill, her final words were actually accusing Diddy of poisoning her.
I mean, it's just chilling to think about. Like, to live with that kind of fear, that suspicion about someone you were once so close to.
Absolutely. It really adds this whole other layer of tragedy to an already tragic story.
For sure. And, it just highlights how important it is to believe people who come forward with these kinds of allegations.
Right.
Especially when the accused is someone as powerful and influential as Diddy.
It takes a lot of courage to speak out against someone like that.
Absolutely. And if even a fraction of what Porter is alleging is true, it really makes you question everything.
Right. It challenges this whole image we have of him.
It does, and it kind of brings us back to what we were talking about earlier about power and how it can corrupt.
Absolutely. And how easy it is to get lost in that world of fame and fortune.
Exactly, and lose sight of what really matters.
It's like this whole story with Diddy and Kim Porter. It's like a cautionary tale, in a way.
It really is. A reminder that the truth always has a way of coming out.
It does.
Yeah.
And that we should be careful about who we put on a pedestal.
Because nobody's perfect.
Exactly. And sometimes the people we think we know the best are the ones we know the least about.
That's a good point. It's like that saying, right? All that glitters is not gold.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
It does. It's a lot to process, for sure.
It is. But it's important stuff. And hopefully this will encourage some more conversations about these issues.
I think so, too. Because we can't just brush this stuff under the rug.
We can't. It's time to face these uncomfortable truths head on.
Absolutely. And listeners, we want to hear from you. What do you make of all this?
Hit us up on social media. Let's keep this conversation going.
Because it's a conversation that needs to be had.
And on that note, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you next time.